A double murderer who killed women decades apart and in different states will likely die in jail. Darren John Chalmers murdered young Geelong mum Annette Steward, but it took nearly 30 years and another killing for him to be caught.
An innocent man spent 13 years publicly named as a killer. He never did it. The man responsible for Annette Steward's death was living under a different sky entirely, working, saying hello to neighbours, waiting to do it again. When police finally caught up to him, he didn't deny it. He gave them a timeline, almost like he'd been keeping track. It must have taken 4 minutes or something like that, he told an undercover officer. That confession came 28 years after she died, and it came by accident, because he'd just done it again. Welcome to Kairo True Crime Breakdown. March 18th, 1992. Geelong West, Victoria. A man lets himself into a house on Hope Street. He's been trying to reach his former housemate for 2 days. No answer on the phone. No sign of her at work. The front door is unlocked. Already wrong. He walks through to the bedroom. He finds her face down on the bed, naked, an extension cord pulled tight around her neck, hooked under the mattress to keep it taut. Deep wounds to the back of her head. She's 29 years old. Her 2 children are staying with their grandparents that week. The only reason they aren't the ones who find her. Her name is Annette Steward. She works at the Winchester ammunition factory at Point Henry, on Geelong's southern edge. Her daughter Jacinta is 13. Her son Aaron is 10. The afternoon before she dies, she clocks off her shift and drives home. Her partner, Keith Pengilly, comes by with 3 friends to fix her TV antenna. They climb onto the roof, sort out the aerial, come inside for coffee, leave within the hour. She's in good spirits when they walk out. Nobody has any reason to think that afternoon matters. One of those 3 friends comes back that night. He knocks, tells her it's his birthday and he has nobody to celebrate with. He met her for the first time 6 hours earlier, 40 minutes tops, while the antenna was being fixed. That's the entire history between them. She lets him in anyway. They sit in the living room. Drinks. Conversation. Late enough that he asks to sleep on the couch instead of heading home. She agrees. Goes to bed. An hour later, he gets up. Walks into the living room. Picks up the household iron. Carries it into her bedroom. She's asleep. He swings the iron into the back of her head 3 times. Hard enough to knock her unconscious. Hard enough to drive fragments of plastic into her forehead. Then he takes an extension cord off the wall, wraps it around her neck, and holds it there. He hooks the cord under the mattress to keep the pressure on after he lets go. Walks out. Drops his gloves in a bin on the way home. 2 days pass before anyone checks on her. When homicide detectives process the scene, there's no forced entry. No broken windows, no damaged locks. He'd left the door unlocked behind him. No defensive wounds on her hands or arms. Whoever did this walked in through the front door, because she'd opened it for him. Which means the investigation's entire starting point is the people she trusted. The crime scene team collects what they can. Bedding. Cigarette butts from the lounge. Hair fibers lifted off her body. All of it goes into evidence storage. But 1992 forensic technology can't do much with samples like these. DNA testing as a routine tool barely exists yet in Australia. The first DNA conviction in the country is only 3 years old. The science still needs far larger biological samples than what detectives have preserved. They seal the evidence, file it. There's nowhere else to take it. Somewhere in that evidence box is the exact answer investigators need. It will take 28 years, a different state, and a second murder before anyone can read it. Detectives work the only lead the scene has given them. Someone Annette knew well enough to let inside late at night. An attack that wasn't planned, since every weapon came from inside her own house. That means the suspect pool is anyone she'd ever opened her door to. Keith Pengilly, the 3 friends who fixed the antenna. Co-workers from Point Henry, former partners, neighbours. The friend who came back that night tells police he went straight home after the antenna job and never returned. Nobody contradicts him. No camera on the street to check his story against. His statement goes into the file with dozens of others. He walks out, goes on with his life. By the end of 1992, the investigation has stalled. By 1993, it's cold. For 13 years, an innocent man will carry a murder that isn't his. 15 years pass with the wrong name attached to this case, and the right one still hasn't left a single trace anyone can find. Jacinta and Aaron grow up without their mother, move out, eventually move to Queensland and start families of their own. In 2007, a Victorian coroner named Ian West reviews the entire case file and names a suspect, a co-worker of Annette's from the Point Henry factory. Annette had reportedly told colleagues she was frustrated with him in the days before her death, and the coroner finds he downplayed how close they actually were. He denies any involvement. At every police interview, again at the inquest, there's no physical evidence tying him to that bedroom. He's never charged, there's never a trial, but a coronial finding naming him as the sole suspect becomes public record, and it follows him to work, to the pub, to family gatherings. For over a decade he carries the weight of a murder he had nothing to do with no courtroom where he can ever clear his name. If you've ever wondered what it costs an innocent person to simply be the wrong name in the wrong file, this is that cost. Paid for 13 years by someone who did nothing. July 2015. The Victorian government puts up a $1 million reward for information leading to a conviction. One of the largest cold case rewards the state has offered. Jacinta, now 36 with children of her own, talks to reporters about having to explain to them why their grandmother isn't at their birthdays. She says she'll support anyone who comes forward, even for the reward money, if it means finally getting an answer. Tips come in. None of them lead anywhere. The reward sits untouched for 5 more years, waiting on a lead nobody in Victoria could have predicted, because the man they need isn't in Victoria at all. He's 3,000 kilometers away, in Perth. The break in Annette's case won't come from anything happening in Geelong. It will come from a phone call about a completely different woman in a completely different state, and nobody investigating it yet knows the two cases are connected. May 2019. A 60-year-old woman named Diane Barrett disappears from her home in Medina, a suburb south of Perth. She lives alone. That evening she'd cooked dinner for her next-door neighbour, then walked over to his house afterward for tea. While she's there, he goes into his bedroom, injects a significant amount of methamphetamine, comes back out, and attacks her with his hands and a metal bar, strangles her to death inside his own home, loads her body into his car, drives more than 50 kilometers south to dump her in bushland. Her house is found abandoned, her dog still inside, the TV still running, her car still in the driveway. Her body isn't recovered for 7 months. Western Australian detectives focus on the neighbour from the start. He's the last person known to have seen her alive. Once they have enough to bring him in, he confesses. Asked why he did it, he says he isn't sure. He says he just did it. January 6, 2020. Police arrest him at a home in Wembley. He's 52 years old. His name is Darren John Chalmers. The arrest barely makes news outside Western Australia, but when Victorian Homicide Squad detectives hear about it, they pull the 1992 file. They'd never had a name to test their preserved evidence against. Now they do. The bedding, the cigarette butts. The hair fibers that had sat untouched in storage for 28 years can now be read by forensic technology that simply didn't exist when they were collected. Investigators run Chalmers' profile against all of it. It matches. His DNA is on the bedding, on the cigarette butts, on the hair lifted from her body. The man Western Australian police just arrested for choking Diane Barrett to death is the same man who slept on Annette Steward's couch on the night of March 16, 1992. While he's in custody, Victorian police place an undercover officer near him, and Chalmers walks through the night in detail. The knock at the door, the birthday lie, the drinks, the couch. And then the part he'd never told anyone. Asked how long it took, he gives that specific, almost clinical answer. About 4 minutes. Asked why he did it. Same answer as with Diane Barrett. He wasn't sure. Same non-answer he'd given twice now, 3 decades apart. For 28 years, an innocent man had been publicly suspected of a murder he had nothing to do with, while the real killer worked, had neighbors, said hello to people at the shops, and eventually killed again. One question still hadn't been answered by any of this. What would actually happen to a man who'd already served 1 life sentence, when a second murder from decades earlier finally caught up to him? Chalmers was 25 years old the night he killed Annette. Not a boyfriend, not an ex, not a co-worker holding a grudge. A friend of her partner's she'd known for about 6 hours. January 2021, a Western Australian court convicts him of Diane Barrett's murder. The judge calls it as serious as it's possible to imagine. Sentences him to life with a 20-year non-parole period, noting the killing was made worse by how Chalmers misled police during the 7 months Barrett's family didn't know where she was. Only after that Western Australian conviction do Victorian police finally charge him over Annette's death. He's extradited in March 2023, appears in Melbourne Magistrates Court, pleads guilty by September, November 29, 2023. Jacinta Martin stands in the Supreme Court of Victoria and reads her victim impact statement to the man who killed her mother. She describes Annette as fun, loving, outspoken, someone who'd give away her last shirt and never judged anyone for who they loved or where they came from. She tells the court that because of what he did, she and her brother grew up feeling like a burden to the rest of their family. Then she looks directly at him. She says she knows telling him this will change nothing. She says they still don't have their mother in their lives, but they'll always carry her in their hearts, and that this hearing only reopened a chapter that had stayed unanswered for far too long. She's 44 years old. She's waited 31 years to say those words to his face. Prosecutors described the killing as an aggressive, incredibly violent and sustained attack that happened inside Annette's own home while she was showing him nothing but decency, and asked the court for life without parole. Chalmers' defense argues there'd been no history of violence between them and no forced entry, and points to what they call remorse. Chalmers had even written a letter to the court, asking to be locked up for as long as possible, not 25 years, not 30, 40 plus. He said he deserved it and more. The judge isn't convinced the remorse is real. He points out that after each killing, Chalmers simply went back to his life as if nothing happened, and that the years of silence say more than any letter written from a cell ever could. He notes that had Chalmers been caught in 1992, the murder might have stayed a one-off. Instead, 27 years later, he strangled another woman the same way, while an innocent man carried public suspicion for a crime he never committed. If this story has stuck with you, sit with how close it came to never being solved at all. A full generation had already passed. The only reason it broke was an unrelated murder on the other side of the country, committed by a man nobody in Geelong had thought to look at twice. December 18th, 2023. Chalmers is sentenced to a second life term, stacked on top of the one he's already serving in Western Australia. Combined, he must serve a minimum of 36 years before he's even eligible for parole. He won't be considered for release until he's at least 92 years old, if he's still alive by then. Annette Steward opened her door to a man she barely knew because he told her he was alone on his birthday. It's the kind of decency most people extend without a second thought. According to the 2 women he killed decades apart, it was exactly the moment he was waiting for. And for 13 years, an innocent man paid for that decency with his own name. What do you think should happen to someone who lets an innocent man carry the blame for their crime for over a decade? Let us know in the comments.